Another very important thing you have to be aware of is that Django and the Django project you built is not a web server. Django is a framework for Python, a framework that makes it easy for you to build web applications, websites with Python. And that's what we did in this course throughout this entire course. Now, therefore, Django, the framework, basically contains code that knows how to deal with incoming requests, how to create responses like HTML responses, how to configure that, how to talk to a database through models. All these aspects, which we covered in this course, that's what Django is all about, which is why it's in this course. But there's one thing Django is not about, and that is listening for incoming requests, managing the network connection itself. So Django is not the web server itself, the software that really exposes your computer to the internet and that really handles those incoming network traffic packets. That is not Django. For that, you will need a separate server instead. Now, during development, we had this Python manage py run server command, which gave us a web server on top of Django. And of course, that was kind of provided by Django, since we used this manage py file, which was generated by Django. But that's just a development web server, really just there for us to preview our application locally on our system. It's not an alternative for production. You should not use run server for serving your Django website in production. Instead, there, you should install and use a dedicated web server. And that's where this WSGIPY and the ASGIPY files become important. These files exist in our project folder, so in our project, in the folder that has the project name. And these are in the end the entry points a web server, so this extra software you need to install, has to point at. So we will in the end, in this course section, also learn that we need to install or use a web server, and that web server then needs to basically funnel incoming requests to one of these two files, you could say. And then these files kick off the entire Django application and make sure that Django then is able to deal with those incoming requests. Now, why do we have two files here and not just one? That is answered on the official docs if you check out the Deploying Django article, which of course in general is also a great resource. And there we learned that Django currently supports two interfaces, WSGI and ASGI. And these of course are these two files which we saw. Now, in the end, the differences here are technical details. You can use either of the two as an entry point, and you can learn more about the differences here if you're interested in that. In the end, there exist different web servers which you can use for those different files. You see examples here. And most commonly, WSGI is being used, so that's also what we're going to use here in this course section. This also is the interface with the broadest support by most hosting providers. If you have a hosting provider or the technical knowledge to use ASGI, you can of course also go for that. But WSGI is basically the standard, the most common option, and it is the option we are going to dive in this course section. So that's where this file becomes important. It's the entry point for incoming requests, but those incoming requests need to be forwarded by a dedicated web server. Django is not that web server. And therefore, we will also have to deal with that. We'll have to make sure that wherever we deploy Django to, we have a web server installed which does that web serving part.